My practice is based up in Yorkshire. I'm up in the Yorkshire Hills on top of the Pennines, but my client base is actually a global one. I work almost exclusively now with sexual issues, sexual dysfunctions of various kinds. And one of the most common things that I see, which is what I'm going to speak to you about this morning, is this thing called anorgasmia, which is the inability or reduced ability or capacity to orgasm easily. So anorgasmia actually can be split into various different kind of categories. On one hand, we've got things like delayed orgasm, which means it just takes an awfully long time to get there. The absence of orgasm altogether. People that suddenly find themselves having fewer orgasms or less intense orgasms. But it can also be something that's lifelong. I do find clients that have never, ever experienced an orgasm in any form. Acquired, which is where somebody used to be able to orgasm quite easily, but suddenly they're not able to. And we're going to look at some of the reasons as to why that might be. The most common one, which is situational anorgasmia, which actually, well, it depends on what kind of situation you're looking at. This is kind of interesting. If I asked you how many women would orgasm regularly through penetrative sex, does anybody know what that number is as a percentage? It's 18%. And when we look at the way they classify things like anorgasmia, one of the parameters is being able to orgasm via penetration, which would mean 82% of women would be classed as having anorgasmia, which, you know, I kind of think, how can 82% of women be wrong? So there are some kind of nuances that we need to kind of look at. Interestingly, most women will orgasm or are able to orgasm in the presence of their partner. About 60% of them can, and the other ones can get there. That's normally shame related. So it's not just about you can or you can't, it's also about when you can and who you can with. And that's one of the key things when we look at this. It's not just a case of hypnotizing somebody and going 1, 2, 3, and now you're having an orgasm. You know, like we see some of the stage hypnotists do on stage. That's fun, but that's not going to help the women that I see in my clinic who are having issues just kind of getting there in many or all circumstances. So we have to think about this in this kind of way. All sexual dysfunction is biopsychosocial. In fact, most things that we work with as hypnotists is biopsychosocial. It's not just the mind, it's the mind and the body, and it's also, you know, all the things that we learn, especially when we think about all the misinformation that we learn when we talk about sex and sexuality. We're going to talk a lot more about that, but one of the first things I want to just kind of highlight, shock horror, public service announcement, hypnosis has limits. And when we're working with any kind of sexual dysfunction, including anorgasmia, it's really important that we have made sure that there is nothing going on that's physically causing this, i.e. diabetes, hormones are all over the place. It's really important. Sometimes the most hypnotic thing we can do is suggest somebody go and see their doctor and get a blood test. And actually, we can be doing them a real disservice if we don't do that. So we need to make sure that all these things are in place. Okay, biological blocks to orgasm. These are important. We need to be aware of them. Low testosterone is absolutely key. Testosterone is the orgasm hormone, if you like. Women and men that have low testosterone will have issues having orgasms and the intensity of them. And we often think about hormones declining, don't we, when women reach menopause. So that's their estrogens and their progesterones and the fluctuation, and they drop. Testosterone actually does not fall off a cliff during menopause. Testosterone goes on a steady decline from about the age of 20. And that's in men and women. So we see it kind of come down. And it's really interesting because when we look at the lab results of testosterone, for women, the normal level starts at 0. And yet we know that it's to do with mental clarity, sexual function, cardiovascular health, muscle mass. So the idea that 0 would be an acceptable number is really quite interesting. We know that women will normally have good levels, or seem to have good levels, from a level of about 0.6. So it's worth people getting that checked, because if they're having issues with their orgasms, it may actually be that they've just got low testosterone. And we can hypnotize them until the cows come home. If that level isn't right, then, you know, we're doing them a disservice. So we need to make sure that we're covering all bases. Things like neurological conditions, I'm not going to go through all of these in great detail. Pelvic floor dysfunction is another one if there's a lot of tightness. And a lot of women, especially if they have things like vaginismus, for example, have a lot of tightness, or if they've had lots of pain. And again, menopause, if they've got depletion of estrogen levels and in the vaginal area, in the vulva, that can make things really uncomfortable, which will make you tense up when it comes to having sex or masturbation or whatever it might be. And that can really again, have an impact on orgasmic capacity. Chronic illness, medication is a big one. One of the biggest groups of clientele that I have are women, age about 35 to 65. They all fall within that perimenopausal, menopausal category, and many of them have been misdiagnosed of having anxiety and have been given SSRIs rather than HRT. One of the main side effects of SSRI medication is anorgasmia and reduced libido. And that's why they often use them to help men with premature ejaculation, because it slows everything down. So it's just, again, this is why we need to be aware of the biology and why sometimes that referral back to a doctor is really necessary. Fatigue, lack of blood flow is another one if we've got an issue with circulation, poor sleep. And another biological, as in the way that the body has learned, is the reliance on vibrators and a single method of self-stimulation and masturbation. And that's simply, if your body has gotten used to only being able to orgasm when there's a high-powered vibrator that's kind of helping somebody do that, and then you go in with a partner and their finger, their tongue, their penis, whatever it might be, obviously doesn't feel like that, then that conditioning is out. So we need to help people learn how to respond in different ways, not just in one way. Okay. Psychological blocks, this is really where we start to come in with our hypnosis. Performance anxiety, the law of reverse effect. The harder you try to do something, the less likely it is to happen. Or if you are worried about what's happening and how your performance is sexually, and then you start to monitor what's happening and monitoring the situation, you're not allowing yourself to let go. And I see lots of women that will even do that whilst they're masturbating, so that they're just in this kind of monitoring space, wondering what's coming next rather than being in the moment. Perfectionism, overthinking, shame and guilt is a huge, huge thing. All kinds of things that women have been said to me. I'll give you a quote. One lady said to me, I feel shame, fear and embarrassment. I want to feel excited and discover what my body can do. And another lady said to me, sexual activity in any form before marriage is sinful. Even feelings of arousal were not to be acted upon. So if you see if people are being brought up with these kind of narratives, just even feeling arousal, feeling sexual, and actually having an orgasm can be really scary. This was one that that just really resonated with me, which was, she said to me, I've had 2 orgasms in my life. I was making out with a guy, I had an orgasm, and it frightened me. I rushed to the bathroom and saw that I was wet and wondered if I'd had sex, and I felt dirty and shameful. This happened one more time. I've never had an orgasm since. That happened to when she was 19 years old and she was 52, sat in my office. Things like body image, that's partly also social, but that can cause a disconnection from the body. Fear of vulnerability and fear of abandonment. And I do see a lot of women that have that if they allow themselves to get that close and then somebody will leave them, because Another narrative that women are taught is that nice girls don't, and nobody will want you if you do these things, which is kind of crazy. Disconnection from erotic identity. And that's something we're going to talk about a lot more as we move through this presentation. Anxiety and depression, and then comparison, either by others, so they're being compared to somebody's ex. The amount of women that said, well, they said to me, nobody else has complained, or all their other partners had an orgasm, or why am I shut down compared to everybody else, which doesn't make you feel very confident when you're trying to be with somebody. Or they're comparing themselves to others, and also to pornography. And this is one of the kind of great travesties that we've got going on at the moment. I always say I'm not the porn police, but I do see, especially since COVID, the massive negative impact that pornography is having on people's sex lives. And weirdly, the more people watch it, the less they're having sex, and the more misinformation that they're getting about sex. So when you think about how your average porn movie, if you like, will go, if you look at in terms of female sexuality, you know, the plumber rings the doorbell, within 5 minutes all the clothes are off and some woman's having 20 orgasms, having had no foreplay, not felt any arousal in her body, like she's got some kind of magic switch. Now, we know that that's not real, but you think about the 15, 16, 17-year-olds where now this is really accessible. When I was young, it wasn't accessible. We had to really work to see something like that. We were using our imaginations. Pornography is where the majority of people get their sex education from now, and it's massive sex miseducation. So, you know, if you have kids, please talk to them that porn is not real, because it's really having massive consequences further down the line on their intimacy and their sex lives. Social blocks to orgasm, sexual scripts, sex is for men and orgasm should be through penetration only. This is the big one that, you know, like we were saying, 82% according to some studies of women would be classed as having a sexual dysfunction, even though they can orgasm at any other time, just not through penetration, because that's what the social norm tells us we should orgasm. To the point, actually, that they can be having really great orgasms and still come to me feeling like there's something very wrong with them because they're not able to do it at this magical moment, which is taking away then from their other orgasms because they're worrying about it all the time, which is kind of sad. Cultural and religious conditioning. I've already touched on that a little bit with some of the quotes from clients that I've shared, but certainly religion has got a lot to do with especially women not experiencing pleasure when being sexual. You know, the idea that you're going to burn in hell if you have an orgasm. I have a lot of clients that are in the Bible Belt in America, and that is something that they absolutely believe. They have this belief that, you know, sex is bad and something will go horribly wrong, to the point, and this is what happens, even when they meet all their criteria, they're married, they've done this, they've ticked all of the boxes, that shame, that guilt, that doubt is still very much in the back of their mind. It doesn't magically disappear the moment a ring goes on the finger. Gender roles that promote passivity, silence around needs. You know, women are taught that we should enjoy it a certain way, that just to kind of get on with it, keep him happy. And these things are still around, which, you know, is a worrying thing, that a lot of these attitudes, and they're often promoted by women as well, how to keep a man, you know, keep him happy, rather than tell him what makes you happy, which is kind of interesting. Relationship power imbalances, whether they are financial, emotional, resentment is a killer of sexual pleasure. Media portrayals of orgasms. Again, we've already touched on pornography. Hollywood has also got a lot to answer for. You know, we've got one extreme where we've got pornography, which is very harsh, very explicit, very fast. And then we've got the other side where it's crashing waves and violins and there's never a wet patch and everybody has a mutual orgasm and it's all beautiful and wonderful, when we all know the reality is very different, isn't it? You know, sex is a messy business and orgasms can be even messier. And then pressure to perform or to fake to please a partner. Studies show that around 80% of women at some point will have faked an orgasm with the sole purpose of not upsetting their partner. Studies also showed that about 40% of men have done the same as well. It's not a female-only phenomena, but it's worth kind of thinking that number. When you look at the opposite and ask people, has anybody ever faked an orgasm with you? 20% of men think that a partner may have done, and about 20% of women wonder if a partner's done that with them as well. So we know there's a lot of faking going on both sides and nobody noticing, which is kind of interesting. So this is how I explain this to my clients. First of all, actually, let me just talk you through. I'll just write this up here. So when we're working with the framework to work with actually any sexual dysfunction, there we go. That's the framework that I use, the TRANCE framework. T is teach and educate. So we have to re-educate our clients how their bodies work, what normal is, i.e. Get rid of some of their misinformation so they can understand that having an orgasm during the prelude to penetration or having 4 orgasms during the prelude to penetration doesn't mean, doesn't take anything away if you then don't have one during penetration. So we're kind of expanding in this case when that will be. Also, how orgasms occur so that they understand they need arousal in their body. They haven't got some kind of magic switch. That orgasms come from the mind, not the clitoris. They're both involved, but it tends to be often people kind of try and do it the reverse way around. R is releasing shame and guilt, which is really important because that will keep people in a place of shame, and also being very locked down and worried. A is addressing any trauma, and N is normalizing sexual function. C, communication and connection. E is enjoyment and permission for pleasure. I'm here all weekend, so if you want to know that, I will come back and I can talk you through that TRANCE protocol quite happily. I explain this, the context that I put this in with my clients is I call this the plight of the orgasm chasers. So I'm going to get you just to close your eyes for a moment, and I just want you to imagine something for me. I'd like you to imagine that you are on a train, a commuter train, and the train is running late. Except you have got the most important meeting when you get off that train. And that meeting is going to be a life or death thing. It's going to have a major impact on your life. And the train is getting later and later and later, and you feel the stress building up in your body. And all you can think about is getting to that meeting on time and what it might mean if you don't, and how disappointed you'll be if you miss it. Okay, open your eyes. Do you feel that stress? It's not a nice feeling, is it? Thinking, I've got to get there, I've got to get there. Okay, eyes closed again. Now this time I want you to imagine that you are on a wonderful, magical mystery tour. That you are going on an amazing journey. And it doesn't matter when you get there or when you arrive. But know along this journey there are many wonderful and beautiful places where you can just get off and explore for a while, and everything, the journey will wait for you, and then you can get back on again, tootle off somewhere else, and there's just another amazing landscape just to take in and luxuriate and enjoy every part of. And then another stop. And you can enjoy how wonderful it feels just to be in that wonderful and amazing place. Until eventually your journey ends and you've had the most wonderful, immersive time with all these amazing feelings. And you look back on it and you feel wonderful and you feel satisfied. Eyes open again. I'm guessing the second one felt a bit better. Yeah. That's how, that being on a commuter train, I'm running late, I'm going to miss something, it's all going to go to shit, this is going to be terrible. Stress, 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 stress. Not seeing what's going on around, not looking out of the window. That's what it feels like when women are desperately trying to get to that place of orgasm and they're feeling under pressure. And it's never going to work, is it? The harder you try, the less likely it is it's going to happen. And that's when people will often end up faking it because they don't want to miss the meeting. They don't want to disappoint the person that they're meeting with. Whereas if you're on the Magical Mystery Tour, you can start to see that orgasm, like joy, is a byproduct of sex. It's not the only goal. Notice I say not the only goal, it is still a goal. The idea that we don't want them and it doesn't matter is not true. We still want them, but we need to get to a place where we are overwhelmed by arousal and we can't stop the orgasm rather than trying to get there, because the harder we try, the less likely it is to happen. And women will often tell me, I'm nearly there, and then I try and go over the edge, and then I can't. It's like I'm left there, and it's really, really frustrating. So part of what we need to do is to redefine sex, rather than being what people are seeing, how they're being educated when it comes to things like pornography, which is where most people are now getting their sex education, certainly young people, which we should be really concerned about. It's the kind of thing, what if sex wasn't about getting there, but it was about staying here? Staying in this place of arousal, luxuriating within it, so that it builds, it feels amazing, and you start to really see what your body can do. And when I talk about sex here, I'm not talking necessarily about penetration. I'm talking about touching and kissing and all the wonderful things that we do when we're having sex. And even when people are masturbating, I often tell them, allow the arousal to creep up first. Allow your mind to lead. Don't just kind of get out the vibrator and try and get it over and done with as fast as possible. There's nothing wrong with a quick and dirty orgasm if you're able to orgasm easily. But if that's the only way, then that has real implications when you want to share that experience with a partner. So it's very much a case of having what I would call pleasure without pressure. And most clients that I have never been taught how their bodies work. They've never been taught that the more they allow themselves to relax into their arousal, into their feelings, to luxuriate in it, to have permission to do that without shame. It's the shame that will often hold people back from being able to luxuriate in that way. And we can start to reframe orgasm as an experience rather than an achievement. I've already spoken to about 5 people since I've got here, and they've all said to me the same thing, is that, they've got younger kids. I've got a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old, and according to them, everybody's having the most amazing orgasms all of the time. We know that's not true, right? But that's what social media is telling everybody they are. When we think about when we were younger, all our friends were doing it, weren't they? And yet we find out, I can tell you they definitely weren't, because I can tell you the people that I see in my office that will come in and tell me that they were late developers or late starters because they didn't start having sex until they were 20. And there's so many of them, and older, a lot older. But the belief is when we're younger, everybody's doing that. And it's amazing how people still believe everybody was doing that, even when they get to, 30 or 40 or 50, which is kind of interesting. It's understanding that arousal is not a switch. It's not something that we reach in and right now I'm aroused. It's a process. It's something that builds. I'm going to talk to you shortly about how we can help them access that. And it's to help them discover what I would call erotic wellness. And just like all kinds of wellness, whether that's our physical wellness, our mental wellness, our erotic wellness, it needs work. We don't expect our bodies to be strong if we never go to the gym. We don't expect to be healthy if we live off McDonald's and Subway or whatever it might be. And just as in the same way, if we just watch pornography or we completely ignore our kind of erotic mind, our erotic wellness will suffer. And if our eroticism goes, this is often where our relationships will start to disappear, our orgasms will disappear, and our sexual dysfunction will appear. When I work with couples that seem to have a great kind of time to, great life together, but their sexual life has disappeared, it's often their erotic life together that's taken a toll. Usually kids or illness or work or whatever it might be. And also about helping my clients embrace fantasy as a safe bridge to arousal and orgasm. And that fantasy world is one that's often missing. And we're going to talk to you in some detail about that shortly. So what the hell is erotic wellness? It sounds like, something. What is that? Well, it's a state of sexual and sensual vitality where pleasure, desire, and erotic expression are experienced freely without shame or pressure. And erotic wellness will mean different things to different people. What I might find erotic will be different to what Lara finds erotic or Adam finds erotic. We will all have a very different internal dialogue of what that means. But it's whatever allows us to have that sensual vitality. And notice we say sensual vitality, not sexual vitality. Our eroticism is fed by all of our senses, not just by what we see. It's about what we feel and what we hear and what we smell and what we taste and how even how our clothes feel. Sometimes when I'm working with women, moving them towards being able to orgasm more easily, it's even starts something as simple as getting them to experience very mindfully what it feels like when they have a shower and the water runs over their skin. Because often they are so shut down. It can be starting, in very non-erotic ways. So, this is where it kind of gets interesting, where if you mention the words erotic hypnosis, people will think about all kinds of things and worry about all kinds of things. And that's because erotic hypnosis is as varied as hypnosis. When we ask anybody what hypnosis is, we've got street and stage and, 1,000 different definitions of what, hypnosis is. And erotic hypnosis is similar. You've got everything from, the domination of the mind and brainwashing fetishes and all of that kind of stuff to stuff that couples might use together, maybe within a DS dynamic, to what couples might use together in a more vanilla relationship, to people listening to hypnosis files to get their rocks off, nothing wrong with that either. And then we've got where hypnosis, erotic hypnosis meets clinical. And what that allows us to do, or allows a client to do, is to feel very safe. They can start to feel, if they've never been comfortable or they've had fear, going back to what that lady said to me, I was frightened by my own arousal, I was frightened by my response, is that we can start to introduce those mind states, those physical states, with somebody who is fully clothed, can be sat in their own home if we're doing it over Zoom, and be completely immersed in a feeling, knowing that nothing can happen. Nobody's going to touch them. Everything that's happening is being driven by whatever is in their mind. And it's important that when we work with what we would call, you could also call it ethical erotic hypnosis, is that we have these three things. Consent is the big one. So just let me be clear about this, because people wonder about this sometimes. At no point when somebody comes to see me in my office or on Zoom for a phobia do they suddenly find themselves in an aroused state or having an orgasm. This is very much part of a process that I take somebody through who has come through within my work for anorgasmia, and we've done the shame work first, we've done the trauma, we've done the re-education. This is part of the N, the normalizing sexual function. So at this point we have spoken about the idea of eroticism and feeling arousal in the body. And they want to do that. They want to be able to do that, to do it for themselves, to feel it, and to experience it in a way that allows them to feel very safe. And that's the next part, is this safety aspect of it. And the other thing to say about safety is also safety for the hypnotist. So I am facilitating a process. I am not in their process, if that makes sense. Just in the same way, if you have somebody that's had a flying phobia, when you've done the work, you will then take them through a scenario where they're then on an aeroplane, they're flying and they're really happy. This is the same way where we can take them through scenarios where they are in an aroused state and feeling very comfortable. I'm not in their scenario, just as I'm not the pilot on the plane when I'm taking somebody through something else. So just these are some of the questions or the worries that will often come up. And it's about their autonomy and their sovereignty, so that they feel very much that they own their arousal. They feel it in their bodies, in their way. I'm not telling them this is what arousal feels like, or this is what orgasm feels like. We're helping them discover how that feels for them. And that's the really wonderful thing, because often they've felt high levels of arousal and then they've kind of shut down. But in this safe space, they can move forward and they can feel it through their body, and they can turn it up and turn it down at will. You know, we can use things like the control room of the mind to help them do that, which is just a really wonderful and beautiful place to be. It's not usually explicit, so I'm not describing porn films to them, but I get them to tell me what their fantasies are. And this is actually a really important process, because often when they come in, they will tell me that they don't believe their fantasies are good enough, or that they haven't got an imagination, which is not that they haven't got one, it's usually that I don't think my imagination is good enough, or I don't think my fantasies are wild enough. And when we've got to this point, you know, they're much more able to talk about their sexuality, their fantasies, their arousal. We're 3 or 4 sessions in at this point. This isn't all within 5 minutes of being in my office, so just make that clear. And it's also feeling-led. So fantasy-led and feeling-led. Are there any questions so far about any of that? Cool. This is a big one. So, you know, fantasy is the mind's way of exploring what the body has not yet allowed. I love that. And I tell my clients that. The mind's way of exploring what the body has not yet allowed. So you can start to really kind of get in a different headspace. You can allow yourself to experience something. And you can also fantasize about things that could never happen in a million years. I'll share some of the fantasies that some of my clients have kind of come up with that I never could have thought of. This is why it needs to be client-led, because everybody's internal world, their internal erotic world is very different. So we collaborate. I collaborate with the client. I am client-led with this. And what they want to do is to, you know, some of the thoughts that they have, and once they start to allow themselves to experience fantasy, that's often like that first domino that will go down. And I get the most brilliant and amazing texts about, I've just had this thought, and could we incorporate this into our hypnosis, because I thought it might be really interesting. Let me give you a little, where are we? No, you know, I'm a great hypnotist, but I wouldn't have come up with this. Somebody wrote to me, and this lady, I was put this into context, was so shut down that she, even the word temple, you know, when we talk about our body as a temple, she couldn't even hear the word temple as a kind of a safe space to be sexually, because that had a religious connotation, and she needed to get away from all of that. And she wrote to me this: trees are whispering, luring me to come, so I go. I walk into the shadows, into another world, an erotic world. All of my senses heighten. I feel deeply sensual and connected to nature. Animals are all around and they transform into people. I notice a man who was a wolf and he wants to devour me, My body reacts and I am drawn to him. He leads me to the meadow with the vibrant flowers and I feel playful and free. I run and he chases me and I allow him to because I want to be caught. Isn't that just from a place of being totally shut down? But then we can facilitate something like that in hypnosis that's very immersive with the sounds and the smells and the tastes, so that they can get really deeply into that and just feel what that does with their body, which is a really wonderful thing. Another lady texted me, this is great, Monday morning, and these texts come in, it's awesome. I am provocative and confident. The man I'm with wants to worship me. I feel my power. I tell him he can worship me. I am a goddess filled with energy. This was from a lady who could not be touched. She couldn't bear to be touched. And now she's gone into this place of full body worship in her head, and she can access that with fantasy. This is awesome. And you can see, sometimes they'll either be sat in my hypnosis chair or online, and you can just see the smile and the exhilaration and this shift. And they become filled with this amazing and wonderful, beautiful energy. And sometimes we just allow it to build and build and build and build and build. Sometimes they'll get to the point where they'll have an orgasm, or we start working with orgasmic states of mind, so that's what we do. It's this state of euphoria. And you see people go, they pink up. They often come in, they're kind of like this by the time they're glowing and they're smiling. You must go to Alexandra's talk this afternoon. She's doing orgasmic states of mind. If you want to feel amazing by 3:30 this afternoon, go to that talk. It's just a really wonderful and beautiful thing, and it's such a privilege to see that transformation. So, a quick summary. Anorgasmia is complex. It is not a case of it's switched on or it's switched off, or you have one or you don't. The where and who and the how, we have to make sure that we've dealt with the trauma and the shame and all of those things that can be real blocks to orgasm. But the biggest thing by far is belief, and the beliefs that people have, and this re-education part of it. I have realised the more I work with sexual function and freedom, 80% what I do is actually giving clients the correct information. There's something really beautiful that you can do when we're re-educating our clients, is do some younger work self, the inner child or the younger self. I always use a future version of themselves that's got all the information, that's been really orgasmic, having great sex, whatever it is that we're trying to get over. And then we go back and we re-educate. We do retrospective sex education, and that's really, really powerful. So as the client then gets older again, as we bring them back up through, they have the right information so that they can see themselves having these experiences without the shame attached. And that is so, so powerful. They need to be able to have pleasure without pressure. Be in the moment, feeling free, enjoying all these wonderful feelings coming up through their body. One of the things that's often a real surprise to my clients, and they go back and check with their partners, and their partners will usually confirm it, is that one of the sexiest things to a lot of men is a woman allowing themselves to be given pleasure and staying there for a while. For a lot of men, a turn on is seeing their partner aroused. And yet we've got where a lot of women are just trying to get to the next bit. They're in their heads thinking, what comes next? Rather than, oh my God, this is glorious now. And that's where we need to be able to say that luxuriation. Redefining sex and arousal. And that opens the door to erotic wellness. If we start to see sex as an experience, an arousal as a process, an orgasm as a byproduct of that, a glorious, hopefully many times byproduct of that, rather than feeling that we have to be forcing. I always tell my clients, allow your orgasms rather than to force them. We want them to be overwhelming you rather than you being that stressed out commuter on the train running after them. And once they allow that, and sometimes even I'll tell them, try not to orgasm. That's really powerful. If you get to the point where you think you're going to try really hard, the best thing you can do is actually try not to. Who's ever been in a place where something funny's happened and it's really not appropriate to laugh? It happened to me and my cousins. We've had at a funeral badly a few weeks ago, and just somebody said something and you desperately try not to laugh. And the more you try not to laugh, what do? All like this, aren't we? Like shut them down. Hypnosis is so beautiful and wonderful for this. It's so safe for our clients, and we can do it in a way that is really elegant. It doesn't need to be erotic. It doesn't need to be scary or out there, and it needs to be client-led. When we allow our clients to lead that process, especially when it comes to exploring the world of fantasy, what we do is we give them a safe space to really discover who they are, so that then they can go and discover who they are with other people and by themselves. And it's really important. And erotic wellness is the goal. Not orgasm, but the freedom to feel, to explore, and to really express and feel pleasure without shame. So, okay, we've got maybe a minute. So if you want to connect with me, there's free stuff, all my training, all of that. You can just scan the code and find it. Have we got any questions? Any comments? We've got 5 left. Okay. I was catching up for you, you see. I was being good.
Yes.
Yep.
See the likes of the text, do you make that a strong homework, or just if you come up with something, send it in?
I ask them, sometimes they will write the whole thing out. Sometimes they'll give me themes. Sometimes they'll just say, I've always liked the idea of. The other thing that I do, I'll get them to sometimes go and read Nancy Friday's book, Women on Top. There's a new one out called Want, which is by Gillian Anderson. And what that does is allow people to see that they're not the only one, because people will either worry that their fantasies aren't good enough, or that their fantasies are like way too much and taboo and there's something really wrong with them. So by doing that, it's just allowing them to kind of bring them in. But more often than not, they've come up with something, and for the first time, because we've given them permission to be sexual, to have these feelings, to enjoy arousal, they're just really excited, and they know we've got to that point in our kind of therapeutic relationship where I'm not going to judge them. Somebody else said to me, what do you think about the idea of me letting go of shame and just embracing who I am sexually? And I'm like, that's why we're here, isn't it? But she was what, is that even a good idea? Yes, it's a great idea. Let's go do that. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
What motivates the women to come and see you if they feel that sex is bad, they don't want to be touched and all of that? Why would they want to change, unless it's a partner, obviously?
Sometimes it's because they've got a partner. Other times it's because they know, even though it feels that way, they know it shouldn't. Or they don't want it to. Or they want to know what all the fuss is about. You think of all this stuff on social media, they want that for themselves. And often, here's a lesson about advertising what you do, and they will go to the internet and they'll start to put in, how do I get over this? And they'll find me. And they haven't even thought about hypnosis. Hypnosis hasn't even come into it. But they can start to see that it's not just about their body, it's about their mind. And also you get the ones where they've kind of lost interest, and that's another one where hormones and things can come in as well. So this is why we need to work in that kind of holistic way. But yeah, normally because they want to know, they want of what everybody else is talking about. Any more?
Do you come across women who can't fantasize?
I do, and often, do you ever come across women who can't fantasize, just for the recording and everybody else in the room? I do, but often I've found that it's normally about a block. So with that's when things like erotic stories, erotic audio, things that will feed their eroticism, because our eroticism is made up of many different things. It's, some of it is pornography, some of it is audio, things that we might see. Sometimes it might be that you just saw this really gorgeous person walking down the street and you went, whoa, and then your mind went somewhere else. So we draw from many places to feed the mind, but sometimes it's just remembering a memory as well. It's not always about creating something. Thank you so much for having me this morning. It's party time for me now. I'm done. So that's awesome.